Welcome, everyone. We treasure the after-lunch spot, all of us, but we're going to try to make this exciting and fast-paced. So, you know, I've heard a lot in the last 2 days about how inspiring this place is. And Athens is incredibly inspiring, absolutely the right spot for the conversation we need to have. But I also wanted to say I've been also very inspired by the people, by all of you. There is something about this moment in time. I go to a lot of these things. I'm hearing an intensity, a sense that the planet is at an inflection point, a passion, a conviction, and also a humility. I don't think I've been to a conference like this in a very long time where people have been so much reaching for recognizing they needed partners, recognizing that we needed one another to solve the problems in front of us. So I'm very, very excited about what's going to happen after this conference. Jim did a fantastic job from Gallup of setting up a discussion on place-based. He was talking about work that is meaningful and provides people with economic confidence and security. If you take that standard and say we care about meaningful work that looks after people's needs, gives them independence, but we're going to ask it of all people in all places. So if you take that standard and say it's not just some people, it's everyone everywhere, that takes you right to this conversation, which is place-based. I'm a practitioner. I'm going to jump to the panel very fast, but just to bring you into place-based, I'm just going to make a couple of observations about it. It is not the same old conversation with different language. Place-based is very different. In a lot of countries, place-based is coming out of a distributive issue, not a let's just grow issue. It's been about where is economic development happening. Place-based is the assets and values of the community, so it's also getting at culture, right? Often it's done in combination with local leadership. Sometimes national governments think place-based is just doing national policy in places. It's not. It has co-creation dimensions. And when it works, which it doesn't always do, it's about motivating local actors and having all sorts of local leaders pushing on growth. So it's really quite a different thing and a powerful thing when you get it right. So just maybe to get rolling here, Ian, you know, leveling up is everything I just talked about, I think, right? It's an effort to get at distribution, an effort to, you know, energize the local level. Is it working?
Well, I guess it's too early to say that it's leading to sustainable economic growth, which is what we want. But I think there are some very positive signs. And these signs resonate with your introductory remarks because they've changed how we work. We've stopped being internally competitive within a region and we've started to collaborate. Collaboration within sectors, say from university to university, across sectors with universities and industry, creating that private-public partnership which is set out in the principles that we saw this morning, and creating almost a triple helix, if you will, of universities, government and business working together to create a virtuous cycle of success. So I can see a change, a significant change in how we go about things through collaboration and partnership rather than through internal competition. With regards to levelling up, I think it's only sustainable if there's also linking up. That linking up can be local within the region, but across sectors. But more importantly, it has to be across a whole country. And indeed, I guess internationally too, more and more. And that's because very few regions have got all the components they need for the whole ecosystem of whatever sector is that they're innovating in. So it's really important that you link up across, in our case, from Belfast into the rest of the United Kingdom. But there's also an international linking up that can take place. So that linking up is both local across sectors, national across different geographies or cognate groupings, and indeed internationally. And I think only when you see that sustainable linking up do you get a sustainable levelling up. Otherwise, you'll simply get a short-term impact from discrete regional investment that won't be sustained. And finally, to help that sustainability, we need a different approach to skills. Skills have to be inclusive. We've alluded to some of that earlier today. We've heard about the importance of having a good job. We've got to see that permeate through the whole society. So when it comes to levelling up, you have to do things like basic literacy and numeracy skills, through to digital skills, all the way to the top end where you've got degrees, PhDs, reskilling, upskilling. And we've got to try and take the whole population with us in that inclusive journey. Again, that's only done through linking up the school sector with the colleges, with the universities, and linking up across different geographies. I'll pause there, Dylan.
Let me just explore, because you were very focused on the question of partnering there, so I just want to ask you a follow-up on that. So I think I heard you say that partnering needs to be driven by strategy. So people are linking up to achieve particular objectives. It's not random, otherwise it'll slow everything down. So if place-based is asking the question, what do people want, how do we know that what they want is realistic? What I'm trying to ask you is, how do you inject reality to create strong strategy to drive intelligent partnering?
So when it comes to the analysis, if you will, it has to be evidence-based and objective. You have to look at what your strengths are as a region. So in our case, we would start with what were our strengths from a university perspective in relation to translational research that we can take into a new product or a new service and help a business move forward. We did that objectively, then we overlaid what the business and the economic needs of the area were. Where did we have the business strength? Where did that align? And how could that drive the economy? And with these overlays, we came down to just 3 or 4 areas that were worthwhile making a big investment in to make a difference. And that investment was a public-private partnership investment supported by government to give you that triple helix that I referred to. But I think it's really good practice to do this objectively. Just doing something because it seems good or it might be a good idea is not enough. It's got to be evidence-based, and it's got to lead to a tangible benefit to the population. And you've got to tell the population that it will lead to that benefit and demonstrate that it's happening. Otherwise, you start losing people as you go in this journey.
So Minister, I'll turn to you, and thank you for hosting us here, and it's such an exciting story.
It's our pleasure.
Ours, truly ours, truly ours, Minister. So just on this same topic, and you can bring some real insight into some of the political management of this as well. So I'm just curious, how well do you think local development is working in Greece? And if you don't mind sharing with us where you think it's sort of been very natural and comfortable and evolving very well, and what have been where the tricky parts been in terms of national strategy with local ownership.
Let me say thank you for having me here for this GIS 2022. And it is our pleasure as well to host you here in Athens and this very beautiful and historic city of our common planet. What is important is to understand that innovation and digitalization are core elements of our policies in our governments after the national elections of 2019 under the leadership of Kyriakos Mitsotakis, the Prime Minister. And are the core of our policies because we think that this way we enhance our productivity, and through our productivity we increase competitiveness of our country, we bring growth and prosperity and social cohesion in our people. And these are very, very important, very clear messages to the business community and to the local governments that we are asking for. Now, there are some issues. First is how to bring an umbrella to cover all this issue at the national level in order to have a common approach for everybody. And then how to find ways that the local governments, the local communities are developing their own strategies in order to bring to light their comparative advantages. That's in this way we developed a program in our ministry, the Ministry of Interior, that called Adonis Tritsis. These have many pillars, and in this pillar, every particular local government can choose the pillar that it wants to develop for digitalization, to electric vehicles, from sanitation to water to infrastructure as roads, and we collaborate with them in order to unlock these hidden opportunities. Let me give you an example that maybe highlights this issue. We have in place now a big company, the Microsoft, that is going to invest 1 billion euros in Eastern Attica. This brings a challenge that has to do with a collaboration between two different municipalities, Sparta and Koropi, in order to develop 3 different data centers for Microsoft. Now we have to collaborate with the Ministry of Development, the Ministry of Interior, the 2 municipalities, the Microsoft, the Prefecture of Attica, in order to have in place roads, water, sanitation, all the necessary infrastructure to have in place this big investment of 1 billion euros and thousands of new jobs. This, I think that is a good example of collaboration at the national level with a particular program and very distinct local interests in order to bring growth and prosperity, as I said, in our people.
Minister, if I just want to make sure I understand this. Are you saying essentially that the government's established funding buckets
Of course.
that reflect national priorities, and the message to the local governments is you build the tactics, right? You build the execution strategy, and
we provide,
and we have a funding vehicle.
We have the financing, and in order to facilitate this process to build the structure, the necessary institution building to develop these ideas.
Have you had any situations where there's been governance disagreement, where people have said you...
This happens every day, but at the end of the day, we have to fulfill our goals. And the goals are very important in order to highlight to everybody that's involved in these projects that growth, as I said, jobs, and all of these opportunities have to be unlocked.
Just it's a bit of a tangent, but if you don't mind me asking, you focused on digitalization and digital adoption. Digital adoption isn't the same thing as innovation.
It's not.
It's quite different. So I'm just wondering, from your perspective, what your instrument is for driving technology adoption. Who are your partners? How is that working?
There are, of course, businesses and local authorities. And innovation is everywhere. It's particular for countries like Greece. Even a road that brings together 2 different fields is very important for our farmers to bring innovation to light. But the issue here is to use digitalization to promote our not only our products or our tourism destinations or other opportunities in different places in Greece, but also to give a coherent strategy to bring growth and prosperity, as I said.
Thank you. Thank you, Minister. So Josh, just maybe turning to the United States, in my sense, historically, was the United States had a high comfort with variation in outcomes, right? It was a country that was quite tolerant of it, maybe less so now. And I'm wondering, so I'd like your comment on that, like what's the comfort level with distributive differences in the United States? And also, because you've got some variation, some places seem to be pulling up and others are struggling. So I'd be curious, you know, where it's working, why is it working, and
Sure.
the other side.
Yeah, it's good. And I'll just echo the thanks for being here and for our hosts in this phenomenal city and great sessions thus far. I guess a couple of thoughts on that. I'm struck as we're talking about these competitiveness issues across the globe. And, it was 20 odd years ago, Tom Friedman wrote The World is Flat and sort of recognized this globalization trend. And we all got very excited about that. And I think somewhere along the way, and many of you may face this in your countries, we certainly do in the US, we forgot the US is flat. And so the ability to have regional cooperation was sort of lost. And some of that was driven by the financification of the US economy, this desire to prioritize return on capital over development of talent, to lower costs as much as possible, and to create leverage in your capital stack in order to return capital at the highest possible rate. And what that did is, fed directly into some of the globalization trends, which led to outsourcing. And so you look at what's happened in places like the Midwest of the United States. Our company invests capital and into real estate and infrastructure in partnership with universities. And so we think of ourselves as sort of connective tissue in the economic development framework and supporting and growing innovation. So we went into Fort Wayne, Indiana. And Fort Wayne, Indiana in 1975 had incomes that were 30% higher than the national average. And by 2005, through loss of unions and outsourcing and manufacturing jobs, the economy had shrunk to a point where incomes were 30% lower than the national average. We came in and acquired a 45-acre former GE manufacturing facility where all the motors and transformers were made for the General Electric Corporation. This is a 40-acre campus in the middle of downtown of this community, and you can't underestimate the weight on the emotional psyche of that community of having this derelict, vacant, decaying symbol of what was in their economy. So it employed 20,000 people at its peak, and now is just falling apart. And it feeds directly into, I think, what Jim was talking about, which is so important to place-based innovation, this idea of happiness, of belonging, of thriving, of engagement. And that happens not only in our jobs, but in our communities. And so I think for place-based innovation to really thrive and be successful, this concept of leveling up, of finding the unique attributes in these communities and reinvesting in the quality of place and quality of life, then can lead to greater innovation outcomes. I think that's particularly true. Dr. Kusiev sort of reminded me of this yesterday in her comments when she said, we're not talking about R&D, we're not talking about creativity, we're talking about innovation, which is a new idea that finds a market. And I think where place-based innovation has such an opportunity is the growth that can happen when we're in these unique places. Only in these unique places can we find the ingredients that allow for a new market to be explored and innovation to occur. And I think that's particularly true in sort of a post-COVID environment where we have the ability to be connected on a global scale, but can be very localized in our activities. And so having the two of those together, I think is important. And so what we'll see, I believe, in the US is a distribution away from what's happened over the last 20 years, which is a over-concentration in the coast. And so there was very much a winners and losers construct where so much of the capital was allocated into certain markets and overlooked many of these places where there's great talent and great history of things like advanced manufacturing and discovery that just haven't been invested in. So I think that dynamic is what we're really looking for to shift. And I think you'll see in a lot of these secondary and tertiary places this same concept of leveling up that's been utilized in the UK, we can do in the US, particularly if we can tie it to our universities, because that is the infrastructure that best enables public-private partnership. And partnership is the key word, the ability for the federal government, the state government, the local government to work collaboratively with education and with industry. The universities are a great enabler of that, sort of this post-World War II construct of NSF and NIH and all of these federal organizations that can deliver basic science funding. So this point you're making, Minister, about sort of at the federal level having continuity and having clarity of policy that can then be adapted and embraced at the local level, that partnership all the way through is what's critical to then allowing the private sector to invest and level up in these secondary, tertiary places.
So I want to ask you a tough question, because I think you can handle it. There was a great paper that Brookings did, and the point they made was the manufacturing economy, it was all about cost control. So if a community became depressed and had lower rents and lower labor costs, someone would open a plant. So the market functioned. But when you switch to the knowledge economy, it's not actually about cost control, it's about creating new value, and almost at any price, which is how we get these massive overvaluations of tech companies. So it's the old market doesn't function anymore. So if that's true, and if you're saying that universities are really anchors of getting to good place-based, there's a disconnect for me, because I don't naturally think of universities as asking the question, how do we create value for customers? Right? It's not really where universities live, in my mind. So how are all these communities, who's asking them the question? Where are we going to create value? How do we create value? Like, how is this focus on value creation getting injected at the local level? Does the question make sense?
Yeah, I think so, and I think it's being driven from a couple of different angles. Again, we do have a problem in the U.S. I was talking about this earlier. We have a problem in the U.S. where I think the comment was made, universities operate in uneven conditions. And I think we have that circumstance in the U.S. And there is a bit of a have and have not in our university system, where we've overly concentrated endowment capital and the dollars to go after private investigators and the best students and all that sort of thing. And what we're seeing now is this push at the federal level to increase and more widely distribute funding to support innovation outcomes. So the National Science Foundation, for example, has created a new directorate for technology innovation partnerships, which is really about embracing this idea of innovation anywhere and opportunities everywhere. And that to me is probably what's going to seed this thinking, because that is sort of the efficient way in which the federal government can sort of push the policy. Now, I think you're seeing a number of economic development institutions, and this is where that partnership between federal, state, and local becomes so important, because what happened in our regional and our state economies is we started competing against each other, not making ourselves competitive. And so it was racing to the bottom to try to attract the auto manufacturing jobs or something like that, instead of focusing on innovations in advanced materials or advanced manufacturing that would enable a talent base to be present for those jobs. So I think you're absolutely right. And this goes back to that financification issue, is if what we're trying to do is only focus on return of capital and not focus on some of the broader measures that speak to economic health and vitality, then you're going to lose, and you purely let the market work on that, you're going to lose the ability to actually create thriving and engaged communities. And so if you believe, like I do, that what Jim is talking about is really fundamental to increasing GDP and growing an economy, to have a thriving, engaged workforce, we're going to have to think about it a little more broadly than just lowest common denominator outputs, and really think about where innovation can occur, which is we're going to have to look beyond and solve challenges in a multidisciplinary way, which requires that university engagement. Most of the universities, I think, in the U.S. are prepared for that type of engagement. We have some that think of themselves a little bit too highly and don't want to be, busied with the work of economic development, innovation, and prosperity. But I think particularly in these secondary and tertiary places, the alignment that you're starting to see between government, university, and private is beginning to bear fruit.
So just to punch that up, who is asking the question and challenging communities, where is our value creation? Like, who's really asking that question?
Well, mayor, back to your Brookings point, Brookings made this, mayors have to lead the way in a lot of this, right? And this goes directly back to place-based innovation. It really becomes about what local challenges do we have, and what are the local tools we have to solve them. So if you've got consistent policy at the federal level, if you have a willingness at the state level to engage, the local economic leaders, the mayors and the folks that work for them, are helping drive a lot of these questions. Now, we also do see, again, NSF and what they're doing, the Council on Competitiveness. There are organizations out there who are pressing this agenda and causing people to sort of question what is the role of our universities, because they've gotten very good at telling us how many people they can turn away. And so there's a value question that's being asked of the universities. What are you really here for, and what is all of this philanthropic funding and federal funding enabling you to do? And if it's not going to be admit the greatest number of students, then it needs to be on output and creation, which is in their best interest, because the return on investment from that basic science and translation and commercialization is long-term, and MIT has proven this, long-term better than all of the fundraising activity that they can enable year over year.
So so Josh quoted the brilliant Isabel Gill, and what she actually said just an hour ago was the university does not exist. And I thought she was going to start channeling Nietzsche, and she was going to get very grandiose. She didn't. You disappointed me there, Isabel, but it was a great point. I want to jump to Ray, and Ray, you have had such a broad experience, and you're such a courageous thinker. I'd like to invite you. No, you are. You're very brave. You're a very brave thinker, and I'd like you to take us, if you will, out of the question a little bit. So the question that we were asked was, how does place-based drive global competitiveness? Is that actually the right question?
Yeah, thank you. So first of all, it's been some time ago, but I'd like to remind everyone what Ian said, because I completely agree with you. I thought your points were extremely well made. And there's no question in my mind that localities, non-coastal areas in the United States, I think they're called the flyover area. There's no question in my mind that there's a tremendous amount of talent and opportunity that exists in these regions. No question. I guess one of the questions that I thought we could ask Gallup was, is talent uniformly distributed? Because I'm not sure that I think generally speaking, probably to 4 significant figures, it probably is uniformly distributed. But I'm not sure that's totally true, because I think there is people who go where the action is, so there's a draw of talent that goes to certain regions. So I think it's good to talk about a place that everybody compares to, and that's Silicon Valley. And I took part in a study with MIT to kind of try to understand what made Silicon Valley, and why is it that maybe Route 28 can't reproduce that, why maybe Research Triangle can't exactly be the same. And I'm going to give you the highlights of that, and then let's think about the implications of that when it comes to the comments that Ian made and the question of place-based innovation. So the attributes were, and by the way, Josh, it reinforces what you said about universities as well. Large concentration of technical talent, good cooperation and close proximity among the ecosystem elements. So the ecosystem elements are the technical talent, the innovators, the funders of innovation, et cetera. You can think of what Silicon Valley is today. Extensive professional network among the elements of the ecosystem. So in other words, collaboration among the elements. People would go and meet and greet and talk and share. This is a really important one. No non-compete to reduce the conflicts and stagnation. So California didn't have a non-compete, does not have a non-compete. And so people were able to jump from company to company and then more rapidly share that knowledge and kind of move up the knowledge or innovation chain more quickly. And then finally, cultural diversity, a melting pot to inspire innovation. And so when you think about those elements, it's very difficult to imagine that we're going to have place-based innovation contain all of those elements. So therefore, what are, and I'll ask you the question, maybe it's a good question for the group, but it's a question for you. What are the elements of advantage in place-based? Is it the type of question that they work on and the type of innovation they work on because that particular region is better at that than other places? Is it because of a unique talent base? Or are there other reasons? And because I fundamentally believe that talent is uniformly distributed, and therefore I think we should tap into as much talent to be competitive as a nation or as a region or whatever we are. It's almost like, do we want women in the workplace? Yes, because if we don't have women in the workplace, we're missing out on 50% of the talent, right? So why would we not want regions and cities and places beyond the coast to be involved? We do. But I think there are some challenges when you think about reaching the level of innovation that the coasts have when you think about that distributed network. Now, you also said, Josh, and I agree completely, that COVID has proven that we can bring people together from around the world and we don't even know where they are. All right, if I stay off the video, I can be anywhere. And so that's another opportunity to let place-based tap into the talent, but do it in a virtual way that takes the advantages without some of the downsides.
So I'm gonna take your challenge a little bit and not do quite what a moderator does, so bear with me. There's an amazing story about Detroit and Motown. And there was a producer who found Diana Ross and Michael Jackson and the Jackson. He found all of these amazing people. They were all within like 3 miles of his house. Okay? And he found all this incredible talent, changed the world of music. Here's the thing. If he'd been living in St. Louis or Athens, he'd have found equally good talent within 3 miles of his house. This was just a guy who was really good at spotting and developing talent. The reason I tell the story is because actually I'm a practitioner of place-based. This is what I do. And a lot of places, their assets aren't unique. What's unique is how they organize them. And so this assumption that you have to be honest and realistic about your assets, but this assumption that they have to be unique is actually maybe not correct.
Yeah, I didn't say unique, by the way. I said take advantage of the assets that are available in place. And by the way, I don't necessarily agree that he could have found Diana Ross someplace else. Maybe Diana Ross was unique.
We'll take that one to the bar later. But let me just turn that question back to the panel. Go ahead. No, go ahead. I was going to say, I think I said
unique, and I think it is a good point that it's sort of this idea, you're special just like everyone else, and I think that what has to be unique, because I think you're right about talent being distributed. What has to be unique is how it comes together, how it's organized, and that's what makes it unique. And so it's leveraging those individual assets, which you might have some specialization in. So again, if a region has, decades of history in manufacturing, their ability to move, up the value chain into advanced manufacturing is going to be faster than an area that's only done single molecule biology discovery.
Those were individual talents, right, that he found and nurtured, and like, yes, he's a talented guy. He probably could find talent elsewhere. I agree. But the question here is not individual talent. The question is, I guess another question, are the attributes of Silicon Valley that we talked about, are they necessary for us to have a functional innovation system? And if they are, then identifying individuals or talented individuals won't work because you've got to get them connected in this ecosystem, right?
So, I've spent a fair bit of time in Silicon Valley, Palo Alto, an area, and one thing I always hear there, I want to test this with you, one thing I always hear, because I always say, just give me one, don't give me four, give me one, what's the magic sauce? And this is the answer, the most common answer I get. We are very articulated about where we're going to compete and where we're going to cooperate. And a lot of it is competition, right? So it's not just, we cooperate. We define spaces where there's going to be shared intellectual property and shared effort, and then we define spaces of innovation-inspiring competition. So I don't know if that resonates with you, but it's...
Yeah, sure. I think VCs, individuals, entrepreneurs certainly decide. It is back to the competimates. I mean, there are VCs who lead deals, and maybe they lead a particular type of deal, and they're used to working with a set of other investors who may be a part of the deal. And then there are other investors who, I thought it was interesting, I was going to mention this about Silicon Valley, that there actually are tours. I don't know if they still are going on, but they were going on before the pandemic. They would actually take tours of people and kind of drive them through Silicon Valley to have them absorb the innovation aura as though it were something in the air or water. And so there was that much of a feeling that this was a special place. Interesting.
Yes. Minister and Ian, I want to pull you guys back into the conversation. So one of the things I've noticed in place-based is you go into communities and initially it's like people are preparing for failure. So they say, oh, the university doesn't do this, and the university says, I can't get the industry to do work integrated. There's just all of this in advance blaming, which is like everyone's preparing to fail. It strikes me in the Greek situation that you have been able to establish an expectation of victory. At some point, you built something magical, which is confidence. It feels to me like you managed, and then everyone is figuring out how to win, not how to not get blamed for losing. Right? So just the psychology of it. Am I in the right? Is that perception
Just
accurate?
to bring back to the previous discussion, I'm just a humble minister, not that talented. But in this government, we're trying to give the opportunity to every individual to develop his or her talent. This is very important for the progress of this society. Now, of course, confidence is a key word. When we took place in this government after 2019, Kyriakos Mitsotakis managed to reestablish this confidence about the opportunity that this country has, about the prospects of our economy, and the market and investors all are there. You see the GDP growth last year was above 8%. This year will come at about 6% when the European Union, the Western countries are going to face even recession. And we managed to cut the unemployment rate by 6 percentage points. These are all results of confidence about Greece and Greek economy. So yes, it's a magical word. It's not just psychology. It's dependent on our policies. We cut heavily taxes. We encourage employment. We cut social security contributions. We, let's say, facilitate all the necessary environment regarding businesses. And all this comes to this conclusion that Greece, yes, is a success story over the last 3 years, not just in the economy, but also in other challenges that we're facing, like the pandemic or the energy crisis right now. So yes, confidence is very important since the right policies are in place.
You know, Minister, I want to test this. I think I heard you say, yes, but it has to be credible optimism. So yes, confidence is important, but we needed to make sure that the fundamentals were there so people could believe it. So there's a sort of evidence-based, credible optimism. Is this,
it is exactly, it's credible optimism, not just for the ministers within our government, but also in the Greek people.
So I established that one of my personal success conditions for this panel was that we were going to end on time. So I'll tell all of you, we have 8 minutes and 4 seconds, and we will be done in the time frame. So Ian, maybe just your take on this. I perceive you as quite passionate about place-based work and ambitious about the role of your institution as a builder of place. Leveling Up did face some cynicism, right? So on this sort of discussion around the psychology of it, is credible optimism the right target? And if so, how did you build it?
So I think it's more credible leadership than credible optimism. The latter might come from the former, but regional leaders have to instill in the community they're working in a sense of self-belief and self-confidence to go forward for big awards, big initiatives. To do that, you've got to take them on a journey, let them see that they are competitive, give them that pride, ideally have a quick win. And once you have a quick win through a partnership, collaborative, co-creation model, that becomes the default. And they expect to win. They expect to go into the pitch with a combined team, all playing with the same jersey to the same code. And if you can do that as a regional leader, you can make a real difference. So I think that's a job for the leaders to do. It's one that we recognise. And overall, I guess it's about delivering value back to the community. It's not about cost, it's about value. What do you get for that investment? Sometimes it's short term, and that's when the focus tends to fall too much on cost. It should be medium to long term, so you can look at the value, and that can make a real difference to your community and how they view themselves through that lens of success.
That's fantastic. So I'm going to very shortly ask each of you to just get your last word in. What is it you really want to say? Before I do that, is there a question that anyone on the panel, wants to ask of another panelist? So is there something from this conversation that someone wants to yeah.
I guess I'll sort of frame it as a challenge. I'm curious what everybody. So it's Ray pointed out this framework for how innovation communities evolve is tested in Silicon Valley, and I think One of the things we've got to be careful of in talking about place-based innovation is falling into a trap where Silicon Valley or Kendall Square or these things that have been hugely successful become what everybody aspires to. And it's not realistic. And so I guess the question that I have around place-based innovation is how are we going to measure success? What are the metrics we should be looking for to determine if place-based innovation is working in these localized versions?
Outcomes. I mean, ultimately, it's outcomes.
KPIs.
But you're asking a question about what is the actual metric? Is it
Yeah,
jobs?
what should we as a Global Federation of pushing place-based innovation be saying is the way we should be measuring and determining if it's happening, if it's working? Because it's not just not everywhere is going to turn into Silicon Valley or Kendall Square, but what can we use to determine if it's successful?
Well, before this morning, I would have said productivity, but after this morning's presentation, I wondered about engaged jobs.
Engaged people who are engaged in their work. Thank you. Okay, but not now. I understood. All right. Thank you. Anyone else on this question? How do we measure success for place-based?
Isn't it the differential contribution that these places make toward the desired outcome? I mean, it seems like a pretty straightforward question to me.
I have to say, Josh has opened up one of the difficult aspects of place-based. So for example, in my practice, I have an indigenous community in Haida Gwaii off the coast. This is a community whose development goals are actually quite different. So in that context, place-based is a very different metric. So it's not necessarily going to be exactly.
Well, but they have their own development goals.
That's
so
it.
So then maybe broaden it to achieving the desired goals.
Yes.
Right.
I do like this engagement point. I think I'm with you, which is sort of why I've been wrestling with that since this morning. Is sort of, you can look at each individual area will reach whatever its potential is. To your point, Ray, you set your goals, and if you've achieved them, that's success. But I think this reframing that from productivity to real engagement and thriving as if we can find a way to measure that of community members and employees in those communities, I think would really be impactful.
Anyone else on this?
If we are talking about the final work, it's not just the metrics or the KPIs. We can measure this success by population growth in this area, GDP growth, employment. These are hard KPIs, but there are also others. The satisfaction of the life in these areas.
So politically,
there are plenty of metrics to see there.
But politically, isn't it fair to say, Minister, people really want to know the population is growing in their region? This is a very powerful message.
In my constituency, Eastern Attica is growing very fast.
Yeah,
Okay.
I'll just add one more thing. I think you can separate, the discussion is great. I think you can separate achieving the particular goals of what it is they're trying to innovate as one measure. And then the second measure would be the impact on the ecosystem. And the ecosystem could be all the things that we were talking about.
So 1 minute, 47 seconds, super fast. Ian, a final thought? Speed thought?
That partnership and co-creation is absolutely key, whether that's locally, regionally, or nationally.
Partnership, co-creation, right?
Tapping into the available talent is important, and we need to find ways to do that.
Talent.
Talent.
Yeah.
Invest in human capital, promote competition, and cut high taxes and high skilled personnel.
Fabulous, right? The fundamentals, taxes, competition, talent. Josh?
I agree with all of that.
That's great. So listen, you were a fabulous panel. I feel like we've been challenged both on what are the goals and how do we generate how do we create every actor locally working towards the goals, right? So it's a highly motivated, transformational effort that we're describing here. You were a fabulous panel. Thank you very much.
Did you have an announcement?
Oh, and before I forget, Chad Holliday, Chad, please come up, but I have to tell you, that introduction that you gave to Jim, it was like he got the Nobel Prize. I was green with envy. I think all of us, that was one of the finest introductions I've seen in my life. So, well done. Come on up, Chad.
Thank you.
And it turned out it was deserved. It was an amazing presentation. Please, thank you.